Hello everyone. The so-called Palestinian Authority is considered to be the political entity in control of what ignorant people call Palestine today. There is also a problem that often leads to the official recognition of this imaginary state by other useful idiots. It is a blunder because, legally speaking, not only that Palestinian Authority doesn't exist, but there is also no such thing as Palestine as well. But everyone claims the opposite, I hear you say. How can it be? Well, apart from the fact that literally 99.9% of people are not proficient in international law, there is also an answer hidden in the Oslo Accords. Oslo Accords were a temporary agreement between Israeli government and the terrorist group named the PLO. Yes, I said it. However, the aim was that the terrorists would stop being terrorists and would recognize Israel. In return, Palestinian Authority would be established and Israel would temporarily recognize it as fit to engage in negotiations on their permanent status. Basically, this was an attempt to test drive terrorists to see if they can act like normal human beings for a while. I have no idea why would anyone ever think that this would work. But in short, that's it. However, in order to understand my legal claim, we need to review some fundamentally important details and conditions of this agreement. Because Palestinian Authority areas A, B, and C were all created by the Oslo Accords, all calls for recognition of the Arabic state inside Israel would be nullified had this agreement were invalid. In the next few minutes, I will prove to you just that. Oslo Accords are null and void. More than that, Oslo Accords became invalid the moment Arafat's pen left the paper. Yeah, you heard me right. Since Yasser Arafat was the leader of PLO, his actions must have been compliant with the PLO Charter. Article 2 sees British mandated Palestine as one indivisible unit. Recognition of Israel within its borders would be unconstitutional for the PLO. However, Article 20 is a little bit weird. It sees everything based on the mandate to be null and void, invalidating not only Israel's but also their own claims for the territory and of Jordan. Then again, did we really expect terrorists to be proficient in document drafting? His signature would also violate this article, which allows only armed conflict, not negotiations. And this one that aims at elimination of Zionists by Arabs. Interestingly enough, according to their own definition, Palestinians are residents of Palestine, not an ethnicity. Article 6 of their own charter defines some Jews as Palestinians as well, while the PLO is an Arab organization that aims to control Palestine as their own. And this article that rejects and effectively nullifies the UN partition plan, rendering all calls for recognition of the Arab state inside Israel invalid due to the principle explained in the previous chapter on the Geneva Convention. And finally, Arafat's signature violated the very core principle of the PLO Charter, rejecting all peace proposals. Basically, Arafat's signature was not constitutional. Same like no US president can sign a paper depriving women the rights to vote, Arafat can't legally recognize Israel. And then Arabs violated this dead invalid agreement again just 2 months after signing. See, I'm not making this up. PLO Charter was a real obstacle. But guess what? It still is. The Charter was never amended. This is a material breach of a treaty existing today. In the video about the Geneva Convention, I have explained that a material breach is a legal reason to exit a treaty. PLO is in material breach, and this fact invalidates the Accords as a whole, even for countries that are bound by the Vienna Convention, to which Israel is not even a party. During the interim period of 5 years, PLO consistently violated the Accords as well. Not only that in September of 1996, Arab security services suddenly opened fire on Israeli soldiers everywhere from Judea and Samaria to Gaza, killing 15 Israeli soldiers, but also the outrageous statement from the professional terrorist and part-time Nobel Peace Prize recipient Arafat, who said, "We stopped the Intifada, we did not stop the jihad. We know only one word, jihad, jihad, jihad. And prepare yourself for a struggle if the Israelis do not retreat from Hebron." What is this, if not the clearest example of incitement to violence? Blatant violation of the agreement. But what did Israel expect? After all, PLO is, always was, and always will be a terrorist organization. And then, Oslo Accords, Palestinian Authority, areas A, B, and C all expired naturally. Since the treaty was never officially annulled, I felt like it was my duty and as objective educator to thoroughly research if Israel would be still bound by Oslo Agreement indefinitely. I found the exact opposite. Article 56 of the Vienna Convention on Treaties specifies how parties are to terminate treaties. If the right to denunciation is implied by the treaty, what could serve as implication better than an explicit expiration date in the treaty text? Even if Israel were bound by the Vienna Convention Treaty, which is not, it could still terminate the Oslo Accords upon the expiration date. However, even after it expired, Israel continued to pretend and participate in the Oslo game. As long as Israel keeps playing, PA exists. As long as Israel is playing, useful idiots can recognize so-called Palestine. But after a while, even this becomes difficult. Arabs politically separated Gaza from Judea and Samaria. This is another violation of the core principle defined in the Oslo Accords. But Israel still kept tolerating all of this. And then, in January of 2018, PLO decided to suspend recognition of Israel, effectively nullifying the whole framework unilaterally. So let's summarize. Oslo Accords were born legally dead. Had they been valid, they have been annulled 2 months after birth. If were still valid somehow, they were violated and cancelled throughout their term, between 1994 and 1999. If survived, they have expired exactly on May 4th of 1999, making any negotiation regarding the permanent status of the Palestinian Authority after this date a violation. Even if they were still in effect, separation of Gaza from Judea and Samaria violates the core principle of this agreement and annuls it entirely. If that weren't enough to terminate it, government in Gaza doesn't recognize Israel, which is another violation of the core principle of the Oslo Accords. And the final nail in the coffin of the already dead Oslo Accords was PLO's Central Council official suspension of recognition of Israel on January 15th of 2018. This is PLO's official unilateral termination of the Oslo Accords. You know, democratic leaders are normally being elected once in a few years, but not terrorists. Mahmoud Abbas assumed control in 2005 and holds it for over 20 years ever since then. These are savage terrorists trying to play the politics game in order to deceive the international community into giving them legitimacy. They want all benefits and none of the responsibilities. However, the fact is that since the accords are not in effect, and technically never were, PA are only legitimate as long as Israel is playing the Oslo game. In short, to answer the complaints and the demands of the Palestinian Authority for recognition, I say, are you really asking your own life support system to validate your independence?
Thank you for watching.